Producer's note: this episode contains discussions of sexual assault by clergy and child sex abuse by clergy. Listener discretion is advised.
This is a Dauntless Media Collective podcast. Visit dauntless.fm for more content.
Okay, we're recording.
And we're back. Do you remember how to do this stuff? Yeah. It's been a long time.
Let's put the microphone here. And then...
It feels so weird to be doing this.
I know.
Man, it's been you're still here.
Yeah.
They're still listening to us, Nate.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
You sure we're not just talking into the void?
I don't know. Thank you guys for sticking. I guess if you're subscribed to us, or maybe you've been on Facebook seeing us put up posts about stuff coming up, you saw little hints that we were going to be coming out with an episode.
Oh, Happy New Year.
Merry belated Christmas, whatever holiday, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah. There's a lot of holidays.
Yeah, whatever you celebrate. If you celebrate anything.
If you don't, hope you've had a nice break somewhere.
If you had a break, hopefully you had a break.
Oh man,
this is a tough time of year for some people. So,
it is.
Yeah,
and we're here to bring you some good cheer. I think.
I hope.
We're just, sometimes it's just sitting with someone in their pain, and that is enough, and that is actually a beautiful thing to do. And I think, this episode ties in. Yeah,
so it's been a while since we've put an episode out, as you'll find out later on. This episode was recorded a long time ago. We just haven't had a chance to sit down and get to editing because life has gotten in the way.
I mean, not just the holidays between two countries and a lot of driving back and forth. Before the holidays, we had life.
Yeah, just work got really busy for me.
Yep. We had Thanksgiving, your pre-Christmas going on in the States.
Your Thanksgiving.
Yeah, even before that.
Canadian Thanksgiving
happens in October. But so we've just been...
we've had a lot.
And this is a hobby for us. We don't do this as a job, but we do it because we love it.
Right.
And so when we take breaks, we want to encourage you to, whatever projects you got going on in your life. And if in any ways you're serving others and it's not your career, and then you start to feel pressure of like, well, people depend on me for this.
Yeah.
You take care of yourself. Step back where you need to. Don't make your hobbies become burdens or pressures. And that's what we like to do with this podcast, is we want it to come from our heart. When we have the energy and the time to pour into it, that's when we do. So feel free to just keep sending us your encouragement. We definitely love the feedback. We like to know that what you're enjoying, what you want to hear us talk about, any suggestions.
Yeah. So shoot us messages on Facebook, Instagram, maybe Twitter if you really want to. We're barely on Twitter, and now that Elon Musk owns Twitter, I don't know that we're really even going to be using it anymore. So screw that. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. There's still some people I like to chat with on Twitter. So, and Discord too. Send us.
We've got the Dauntless FM Discord that's active. In our Dauntless, Scott has been going on with chapel probation while a lot of us have been on break, and we appreciate. I've loved Scott's stuff.
Yeah,
that.
Me too. I say us too. I have to.
Been listening to it together in the car rides as we've been driving.
Yeah. So hit us up in any of those platforms. Send us messages what you think we should talk about. We've got some ideas coming up for season 2, some new topics and guests lined up that we are excited to share with you. But we do have a few other ideas for the end of season 1 that we want to put out there. So who knows when these things are going to happen? They'll happen.
Yeah. We took one break. We might take another break. Be patient with us.
We might start season 2 right after ending season 1, and then take a break sometime in the middle of season 2. Who knows? Yeah, we'll see how it all goes.
Ear.
Yeah. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about Hillsong.
Yeah.
If you saw the title, you probably know already.
Speaking of sitting in with you in your misery, yes, we're talking about carving out space for those who are having a hard time during the holiday.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I know we talk about Hillsong a lot on this podcast, even though we're not a Hillsong-centric podcast.
Well, you were there.
Yeah.
You were a service producer at Hillsong for quite a few years. In New York.
Right. At the New Jersey location. And so that's one of the reasons that we cover Hillsong a lot. I think another reason that we cover Hillsong a lot is that evangelicalism is sort of one of the big topics, if not the big topic of our podcast. And Hillsong is sort of the brand name of evangelicalism. Even if you weren't part of a Hillsong church or a Hillsong adjacent church, you probably sang their songs in your church services.
Yeah. I know lots of non-Hillsong people who are wanting to know news on Hillsong and are fascinated with this and wanting to talk about it and wanting to listen to information, because even if their church wasn't a Hillsong church, there was connections.
Yeah.
I even know people where their churches sent their kids to Hillsong Bible College or Hillsong College.
Hillsong College, yeah.
there's a lot of connections.
Yeah.
Whether it's the music,
totally.
Bible college, they're, like you said, they were a brand name.
Yeah, they were a big part of evangelicalism, and that's why we talk about it. And I think because of the years that I spent at Hillsong, I made some friends along the way who have all, as well, since left Hillsong. And through those friendships, forged new friendships. And you've heard some of their voices on our podcast, whether old friends or new friends that we made just through networking through our podcast, which has been cathartic and healing in a lot of ways, to be able to share those experiences, talk about our experiences with some people who have the scars, similar scars.
Yeah, it's been something. I mean, we've had Noemi from Boston, Janice and Lizeth from New York, Wes too from New York as well. Yeah, so, and actually some of those names, at least half of them, have actually been a part of another podcast we started listening to.
Yeah, so we started listening recently to the Discovery Plus podcast, Hillsong, A Megachurch Shattered, which I think is sort of the companion podcast to the big documentary series that they put out. And so far, I've really enjoyed it.
We just started it because we've been doing so much holiday travel, and we just, I think because one of our friends was in it, we listened to that episode. And, we gotta keep going. And then we heard another one of our friends who we also interviewed on our podcast. And you'll hear some familiar voices if you check it out. But we recommend it. It's,
absolutely.
I think, we started off our first episode on talking about Christianity Today's coverage of Mars Hill and how we thought they did a bad job and why we thought they did a bad job. And people still get angry at us for covering that. But we think it's important to have an outside voice sometimes. And we don't mean outside voice like somebody who's never experienced evangelicalism talking about evangelical culture.
Yeah, that's not necessarily what you need. In some cases it might be, but I think ultimately what you need, whether an insider or an outsider, is somebody who is letting the story be told by the people who suffered, by the victims. And that's one of the major issues that we had with the rise and fall of Mars Hill, was that Christianity Today was kind of focusing on what they thought were the issues, why they thought the church fell apart. And they were getting voices, whether inside or outside, of people who weren't the primary victims of Mark Driscoll and Mars Hill Church.
Yeah, and you can't get over the fact, or I can't move past the fact, that Christianity Today is, and speaking of Hillsong being an evangelical brand name, Christianity Today is an evangelical brand name. Yeah, that's their audience. Those are their people. And to critique the thing that they are doesn't make sense. They're not gonna have a narrative that fits with evangelicalism. Yeah. And if evangelicalism plays a part in what happened at Mars Hill, that can't get touched.
Right.
And that's what I enjoyed about the Discovery Plus podcast, is they weren't needing to protect evangelicalism or uphold the evangelical narrative as being, it's not evangelicalism, that's really the problem. It's just this dude, Mark Driscoll and Mars Hill, he was the issue. They didn't need to do any of that. It was just, let's follow this where it leads. Yeah. Let's unpack it.
We'll talk to the people who were harmed. We'll let them tell their stories. Yeah. And I think that's what's most important when it comes to telling the stories of these churches that have harmed people and continue to harm people. There was one thing that stood out to both of us on one episode. Dalali, who was a former Hillsong NYC video producer, she shared her thoughts on what it's been like leaving Hillsong, and something that she said really resonated with us, particularly why the music is so triggering. Like, I mean, for her, she was involved in the Hillsong engine for a large part of her life, having been at Hillsong Paris and then moving to New York City and being a part of launching Hillsong NYC. For me, Hillsong, even being a part of my childhood, it was sort of the rebellious part of my childhood because I wasn't allowed to listen to that kind of music. That shows
your background.
But it was still a big part of my upbringing. Darlene Check, Shout to the Lord.
Who doesn't remember that?
Yeah. And then after I left fundamentalism, Brooke Fraser, Hosanna, those songs that became the soundtrack for our faith. And I sang those songs and devoted myself to the message that was being put in those songs. Right. And everything, my volunteerism, my career, working in church ministry.
To work as a children's pastor.
Like all of these things, I devoted so much of myself to this thing that I then discover to be toxic and destructive and painful and harmful for so many. And I think that's where so much of the pain lies.
That's what Delali was saying, right? That part, me and you both paused and had like our own side conversation just on that note of why it's so triggering to hear that. Yeah, and we even notice it at Christmas time when we're listening to Christmas songs that, have lyrics about Jesus, and then we'll hear the same song by a contemporary Christian music artist or an evangelical, and then hear it from a non-Christian artist, and it's different. Like there's something that is so much more painful and it hits you right in like somewhere in the feels when it's a Christian evangelical.
And it's not just the quality.
It's not just that the sound quality of the Christian music is a little subpar. It's also knowing how we were involved in that and how much, when we talk about evangelicalism, it's not from a bitter place. It's not from a we hate evangelical place. It really is, we love these people. They're still in our lives. We understand what it is to want to be a part of something good. And some people who listen maybe are still evangelicals and are starting to get a sense that something is off. Maybe the damage is starting to surface a bit in their experiences and they're trying to make sense of it. And some of you are out of those environments, but still processing, still trying to heal and piece together what the frick was all of that? What did you just come out of? We're still there. Years later, we're still in it's been years, but we're processing still as we're watching things collapse, and we care. We're not talking about this like, haha, look at the downfall of another evangelical church. We hate this group. No, it's we know what it is to be on the inside and to sincerely devote our time to it and to care. Yeah. And part of our gift of love and healing personally is to continue to talk about the problems that we didn't see when we were in it, maybe help other people be able to unpack some of that pain and to sit with you and go, no, you're not nuts. You're not, this really did happen. And it was confusing. It makes sense that you didn't see it while you were in it.
And speaking of someone who was in it, today's guest, the guest on today's episode, like I said previously, we did record this one a long time ago, and we're finally getting it out.
We're behind, guys.
But I mean, the timing is sort of perfect, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But our guest in today's episode is Tanya Levin. Tanya had been a part of Hillsong since its inception, before it became Hillsong Church, when it was still the Hills Christian Life Center. Tanya was there. She was a part of the church as a youth. And she tells her story in this episode of how she ended up at Hillsong and what it's been like leaving Hillsong.
Our previous guests, quite a few, have been a part of the launch. Janice was there from day one in NYC. But if you didn't know about the Hillsong organization, it actually started in Australia.
Yes.
So, North American Hillsong is it cropped up in its heyday when it was, how big was Hillsong?
Hillsong at its peak was somewhere around 150,000 attendees globally. Yeah.
And that was probably 2015, 2016?
Somewhere in 2016, 2017, around there. I mean, that's counting the North American campuses, but even leading up to the launch of Hillsong NYC, which was its first North American campus, Hillsong was probably somewhere in the 90s, close to 100,000 attendees, and they just continued to grow.
And then to just see this spectacular collapse of, all the churches that have left since.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So Tanya was there practically from the beginning, back when Hills Christian Life. Yeah, she talks about how when she got there, Hills Christian Life Center was 300 people meeting in a little warehouse.
Hills Christian Life Center being the name of Hillsong before it became
Hillsong Church before it became Hillsong Church. Yeah, she wrote a book about her experience at Hillsong called "People in Glass Houses." And that book kind of was sort of blacklisted by Hillsong, sort of to their detriment, right? Because when you tell people don't read a thing, they're gonna read.
Well, if they've never heard of it, they didn't know that someone wrote a book about the problems in Hillsong, and then the leader's like, "Don't go check this out." It's like, well, okay, thanks for the publicity, I guess.
Right. And it only recently became available in the U.S. The book hadn't been available in the U.S. And then, she goes on to talk about that a little bit. So you'll hear some of that in the episode.
But the timing.
Yeah. So about the timing, right? So she has a podcast called Leaving Hillsong. I think it's a must listen for people who are kind of finding their way outside of evangelicalism, particularly those of you who were in Hillsong or Hillsong adjacent churches. But she keeps kind of up to date on the latest news regarding Hillsong and Hillsong's founder and former global senior pastor, Brian Houston. So if you're not very familiar with what's kind of gone on with Hillsong Church and with Brian Houston, so Brian Houston stepped down as the global senior pastor, and there's been a lot of drama regarding his and his wife's relationship to the church and how that's causing some rifts within the church. But also, part of the reason that he stepped down, among many reasons, but one reason was to focus on his trial for covering up his father's child sex abuse. His father was a known and convicted pedophile in New Zealand before they moved to Australia to start Hill's Christian Life Center. So his father was sort of the founding pastor of Hillsong Church before Hillsong Church was founded. And Brian Houston covered up his father's pedophilia. And so he's on trial for that, for the cover-up, for, I guess, for some of the actions that he took in trying to keep everything covered up. So in any case, Tanya has been kind of staying up to date, keeping her followers up to date on her Instagram as to what's going on.
Yeah, she actually attended. She went to the trials. They were public, so she attended. She wasn't participating in them, but she took vigorous notes. And in Australia, they have different rules about, what you're allowed saying, because they don't want the media slanting the jury. So they actually have a blackout in terms of what they're allowed saying and how they can talk about it. So Tanya doesn't really do a lot of conjecture and, give opinions too much when she covers the trial. If you go listen to her podcast, she's just going to kind of read through her notes and let you know how the trial unfolded. For those who weren't in the room and are curious what was going down, she's going to go through that. But you can listen to past episodes. She's done, she gets into a lot of the history and different people who've had experiences at Hillsong and how it's gone down. But we wanted to cover her story. Yeah. She takes the time to cover a lot of people's stories, but we wanted to know what got her into this. She's in the Discovery Plus documentary as well, but she runs her own podcast and she keeps people up to date on what's going on. So we wanted to talk about her book that she published a while ago and what this has been like for her. Yeah. And we recorded this before the trials. Oh, like Nate said, we've had this in the queue for a long time. Right.
But I mean, the timing couldn't be more perfect since the first part of the trial just ended. It was a 2-week trial, and then it's going to pick back up in the summertime. But I think that's about it.
That's a good intro, Nate, to our first episode back.
So without further ado, here is our conversation with Tanya Levin.
These boys are still living like it's 1987, and they can get away with just moving from town to town. And I think the other fascinating thing has been watching, like, say, with Me Too and movements like that. The more people that come forward, the more people come forward. And if you don't feel like what happened, to you was a crime, think about it if it happened to your best friend. Because we're totally taught to devalue ourselves.
Hi, I'm Nate.
I'm Gail.
And this is Full Mutuality. So on today's podcast, I'm actually very, very excited. I know I say that. I feel like I say that every episode. I'm very excited about today's episode, but it's very true. I'm always very excited about each episode because we make incredible connections with people, and this is no exception. So on today's episode, we have Tanya Levin, who is the author of the book People in Glass Houses, and I think it only recently became available in the U.S. It's been available in Australia. So, Tanya, tell us a little bit about your background. So, for your sake and who we are, so you're aware of what we do on our podcast. We do talk a lot about evangelical Christianity, and so listeners, for you all, Tanya does have a background in evangelical Christianity. In fact, somewhat of the home base for evangelical Christianity as it's been marketed today. So in episodes past, you've heard me and Janice and Wes and Noemi and Lizeth all talk about our experience with Hillsong Church here in the U.S., whether it was Hillsong New York, Hillsong New Jersey, or Hillsong Boston. Tanya,
we've got the mothership here with us.
Tanya has experience with Hillsong in Australia. So Tanya, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for having me, Gail and Nate. So good to be here.
So
So we kicked off the episode just kind of discussing, we're going to talk about Hillsong. Your book, People in Glass Houses, it talks about your experience at Hillsong Church. Could you give us a little bit about your background there? How did you go to Hillsong? Did you grow up there? Was that your home church as a kid, or did you come to it a little bit later in life? And was evangelical Christianity kind of a thing that you were born and raised in, or was that something new for you?
It's kind of complicated but straightforward. My mother is a Jewish South African. My father was English, raised in the High Anglican Church, we call it, and they met in South Africa, got married. My dad had become a born-again Christian at a Billy Graham crusade, and he eventually got my mother into it. The story's a little murky. I don't know who, she's like, I had to. And he said it was by a revelation. But anyway, we went to a Episcopalian church, you guys will call it, for a lot of years. And my parents then wanted to, I don't know where it came from. They started exploring Pentecostalism. I was 8, and we went to a little church in a suburb. I ended up getting baptized in a pastor's swimming pool and came out apparently speaking in tongues when I was 8, came up out of the water. And then moved house. Fast forward years later, we move house and we move into an area where the local Pentecostal church is called Hills Christian Life Center. And there was 300 people. It was in a warehouse, an industrial suburban warehouse, really out of back of nowhere, but it was pretty remote and inaccessible. There was a sign that went, that way. Just, Brian and some friends and a couple hundred other people. I was 14 at the time, and this was 1985, so early days.
How long had that warehouse been around or had been there before you guys showed up? How new to the neighborhood were they? Okay.
I think 3 years.
They weren't known as Hillsong yet. They were Hills Christian. What's it called?
Life Center. Yeah. So the guy who started it, the father of Brian Frank, as you know, he had started these Christian Life Centers. The first one was Sydney, and then they went out into the suburbs, and that was one of the suburban areas they hit. So it was Hills Christian Life Center because it's in an area where a lot of the suburbs have the name Hills at the end. Seven Hills, Borkham Hills, Castle Hill. It's the Hills.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's
Hillsong buffs out there. Right?
So I'm guessing that's a suburb of Sydney then, right?
Yes.
Okay. And how long were you attending Hills Christian Life Center?
So that's 85, and then I finished school in 1989, still thinking this is all kind of going to keep going. And then I went to university and things started really changing and I started going less. My memory's a little foggy. I got a boyfriend who was an atheist, so I was in a lot of trouble, dissonance-wise. So I just kind of stopped going as often, and I'm guessing 91 is when I really kind of wound it up and stopped.
But you still kind of continued to keep track of the church, if I'm not mistaken. It was sort of I
had a lot of friends in there, and we all kind of kept in touch. There wasn't bad blood or anything. It's just they kept being good Christians, and I was a really bad Christian.
Those are our favorite people.
Yeah, they're the best kinds of Christians.
I mean, I think Jesus wasn't a Christian at all. People often get that confused.
Yeah.
But he definitely would have been considered bad if he was in that group. I don't know. Can't imagine him fitting in with what people consider a good Christian.
So then, do you want to just keep going with the spiel? I mean, because what happened, by bad Christian, I was I can't go there, but I can't go to hell, so I'll just stay here and have anxiety for 12 years. That's what I'll do. I'll just stay up at night and rock. While all my other friends are who cares, man? You find out when you die.
Yeah. Which it's interesting too, because I was born and raised in an evangelical Christian life, and so the thought of, oh, just who cares, find out when you die, would have scared the shit out of me, because, like, quite frankly, I firmly believed that it was heaven or hell, and you had to believe in Jesus in order to go to heaven. So, I mean, like, if I had friends who said, oh, who cares? Don't worry about it, I'd be like, of course you have to worry about it.
But what other question is there, right?
Right.
I mean, we all know you could get hit by a bus this afternoon and then you'd be sorry, right? If you, like, and because you never, that's the thing, you never know. Am I in? Am I out? Did I do a thing? Did I do too much today? Am I what? Where is my name in the book today? Try being a Jewish Pentecostal.
Yeah. And they say things like that on front the stage when you're in an evangelical church. Tomorrow, you don't know what's going to happen. You could die. And like, so those thoughts are already planted in your head. Like, you know, you got to be careful because you could end up in the wrong place if you didn't do it, you know, fast enough, soon enough. If you delay putting off this commitment, they make it like an MLM sales pitch, like try and pressure you right away to make a decision. Because the longer you wait and think about things, sometimes the more you question. So it's like, let's do a pressure thing right now and get.
I mean, did you find that then you like kind of did a bad thing knowing it was a bad thing and then like waited for the bus because you were like, well, I'm on my way now.
I didn't like, it wasn't like I was waiting for it, but whenever I would do something and then I felt guilty about it, I prayed so much. I'd be like, oh God, forgive me for this, you know, and pray with specificity, confess your sins to God, you know, and of course there's Bible verses, they come right into your brain, right? They're like, you know, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So confess, keep confessing everything, and just, I mean, it's like a grind constantly, because the other thing too, I grew up in an environment where they would say, you know, we have sins in our lives that we don't even know about. So just keep on confessing God, keep on praying. So, and
the kind of egocentrism of it all, like being in the 8th grade and doing something wrong at school and thinking God was sending a thunderstorm to show me how mad he, like, what? Anyway,
you know, I really appreciate this part of the conversation and just the anxiety that it produces, because not only is there the sales pitch to get you to believe, but we were taught constantly about hell and the reality of it and how real it was. And it was like, so for somebody to just think, well, just, you know, find out later, you are indoctrinated from a young age into having that fear of going to the wrong place. And, you know, the reason all those Bible verses were popping in your head, Nate, is because they preached them nonstop to tell you about, I mean, I came from a Pentecostal background, and when I left the Pentecostal church, I was finding it reassuring to be in an environment, it was still evangelical, but saying like, you're eternally secure. Because from like the Calvinist perspective, you're secure in God's hand. You can't lose your salvation. Because when I was Pentecostal, I was always hearing, if you don't confess your sin and the rapture happens, you're going to hell. And I heard that. I don't know if you heard the same thing, but like for me, that was like a constant, like you got to be always ready, you know, because you can do something bad and then it's all stripped away from you. And like you're not secure. And that was something that I heard.
Right.
Did you hear that? Was that a message that you also had?
I mean, my mother kept the kitchen clean because you don't know. And she didn't want like the left behind people to think, you know what I mean? So she even like took all the fridge magnets off once because she's like, I don't want the people left behind to look at my fridge. Beyond constantly. And it's just reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. So,
So no wonder we had anxiety. Like, hello. And so like the system is set up in a way to make you be in a state of constant anxiety. Even if you leave and walk away, those messaging still
that fight or flight thing too. Like, yeah. A lot of people like that I've noticed during this constant state of anticipation and fight or flight, or like, you know, the next event, the next meeting, the rapture, the whole thing. It's exhausting.
Their nervous system is just constantly in a heightened state of alertness without even having a chance to calm it down and to think it through in any sort of a logical way. I guess questions related to, you know, you talked about leaving and feeling full of, and then spending the next 12 years in anxiety. But I guess I want to back it up. At which point, like, because I mean, we're jumping into Hillsong stuff in our day and age. You have been at this, talking about this before most people, before New York Hillsong was established, before they came to the U.S., before the problem started, and they exported this garbage to I'm sorry, I don't know what else before they brought this garbage to North America, you were a part of exposing a lot of stuff before the most recent scandals have broken that have caught North American audiences' attention with, Justin Bieber's pastor and whatnot. I actually saw you the first time in a documentary that was Discovery Plus, and then we found out you had written a book. So I'm curious, at which point were you like, this is messed up and I need to talk about this? And how did that come about? How did the writing of the book come about? Where were you in your journey when you decided I need to put this out there and I need to start talking about it? And it kind of seems like you were doing this so early in the game that must have been a lot of pushback. How did this all go down for you?
Okay, cool. Yeah. So no one really asks this. I went through so much pain not going to church. My family were there. My parents were there, and I had this like atheist boyfriend, and everybody, it was this terrible time for my parents and my family, but I couldn't go there. I couldn't go there anymore. And I said to my friend, who I refer to in the book as Jules, I'm like, I can't go there anymore, but I'll leave them alone. But if they start interfering in the community, unlike innocent bystander people who don't know what they're doing in their little building on their own, then I'm going to have to tell people. And I couldn't tell you today what I was trying to tell her that I would report, but I knew that, I had formative ideas. And so then, I carried on and I figured it was my fault. Those nice people were like all the people I grew up with, doing well. Here's me like changing college courses and like end up getting married to the first boyfriend because like, of course I had to. And, because we had sex. And, so then I was a crumpled up piece of paper lying on the floor. Like I'm useless. So, they were all doing well in the trajectory of life. So I figured it must be me, but I just can't go back there. And like my outside friends are like, you still banging on about that Hillsong? And I'm like, yes. And then my Hillsong by this point? Nearly Steady Hills for a long time. Sorry. They were like, can't you just like love God? Like he loves you. Like, do you have to always question someone who loves you so much? And like, why don't you just go to Bible college if you've got all these questions? So I was like, cool. I'll just keep not. And then it was really only because I didn't live that far away that I ended up, going to the big announcement. See, we've got laws in Australia where you are not allowed to discuss the trial. So the media is not allowed to discuss the trial of Brian Houston. I could probably get charged if I publish something that is seen to influence the outcome of his trial. So that's why there's such a blackout. But you guys...
we're allowed to talk about this. Come on, Girls Australia.
I mean, seriously. So I had, I still had my friend, but they were a little bit kind of like looking at me with the side eye because they're like, you've really been like mean for a long time and you just keep being mean about God and stuff. And, we think you're up to something, but I'd been to the Pat Mercedes show where Brian had kicked his best friend out, and I was like, wow, that's like, because I've known these guys since they were like 28 years old, right? Like it's crazy. Anyway, my friend and I were looking at this website and we found all this stuff about Frank Houston, like Brian's father. I didn't know him. I didn't know, some old guy, right? So I'm like reading this stuff going, what? Why isn't everyone talking about this? So I call up my friend and I'm like, I found this like website and it's like back in New Zealand and like Frank had to run away to Australia. We're like, what's that about? So she calls her friend who's Brian's PA. So the story goes and he's like, I'm going to sort this out this weekend. I'm like, sweet, let's go. Let's go and see what you got to say for yourself, right? Not knowing really, because we're like I'm in suburbia. I had a baby at this point, right, whatever. Literally, like I'm sitting there in this thing and I was also I'd done most of my social work degree, but I was also doing like a separate course on child sexual assault. I'm sitting there and like I didn't know, but we've been talking about whether this was Mandela effect or not, or like who knew what. But Brian stood there and talked about himself, talked about his wife, talked about how like Joel still believes in God. And it's like weird, even like, I mean, that was 20 years ago. And even I, do you know what I mean? Even with my limited training then, there was no mention of victims. There was no naming of what happened. There was no like, sorry, and I get upset because there was no like, we are going to have a zero tolerance on this. This will never happen again in this place. No, it was all like, poor me. But the best part was I looked at everybody stood up and applauded. Everyone was like, yeah, poor you, Brian.
Wow.
And I was like, so the very long answer to your question is I was sitting there like, one day I'm going to write a book and it's going to be called 12,000 People Are Wrong and I'm Right. Because it felt so good knowing that I did not know we needed to have this conversation about the child abuse, but apparently we do. I thought we had absolutes in culture, but apparently paper covers rock and, Brian's sadness covers everything. So, yeah, I went running back to this tutor I had and I was like, can you groom a whole congregation? Just like, yeah, of course you can. You can groom a community. I was like, right. And, I ended up nagging a friend of mine. I've had a lot of good ideas, but I ended up nagging a friend of mine who was writing a book. I want to write a book about Hillsong. I want to write this book. And she was like, Tanya, if you're serious this time, send me a chapter outline, a couple of chapters, and I'll show you the publisher. And really long story, but I met the editor who looked at me and she was like, so, Hillsong. And I really wonder if that story would have come out in the same way. Our Australian media have always been suspicious, very cynical, and not, faith sensitive, but not, so they've always been really cynical towards these guys. I wasn't discovered at the airport. This isn't a Kate Moss story. This is like they had a brand that they could sell. And I got this opportunity to tell my little story or say something. I don't know. But, it came out in 2007. I had no idea, right? Really, who could have taken Brian seriously? Can you imagine? I never thought he'd do what he said he was going to do.
It's wild to think, I'm almost imagining the early days, you're saying 300 people meeting in a warehouse, and I'm sure it probably started even smaller than that. To
40 apparently.
Yeah. And then to what you said, 12,000 people when that announcement was made. And to think that Brian Houston had, both he and his father had kept that secret. What's wild is it's not even like it's not even a secret. Like it's not like they didn't know in New Zealand. He had to leave New Zealand.
And it was a matter of time. And when I say to you 12,000 people are wrong and I'm right, like it sounds like it's a point score, but it was a total sense of relief and freedom and liberty. Like I'm happy to live with that. You know what I mean? I can get my head around that is what I'm trying to say. I was like, okay, cool. Doesn't matter if their lives are all still looking good. I'm still right and child abuse is wrong. So, hey.
Well, yeah, when you're living under the constant illusion that all these people have their life together and then you're watching them give an applause in a scenario. And we've seen this in the evangelical church since that time over and over again as a script.
What in Indiana again? It was the most depressing video, that Indiana video where the woman calls out her pastor and they all rush to attend to him.
That there's something people, I was listening to a podcaster talk about, looking for good in evangelical culture and then getting burnt out and realizing it's everywhere, and the bad is everywhere. The rot is everywhere. He couldn't escape the toxicity of it, even though he was looking for the good in it. And I think, when we keep seeing the same patterns repeating themselves, when there's constantly the pastors are getting flocked to and people are applauding them when they're doing the wrong thing and when they're covering up for abuse. And that's the pattern that gets set. Like, if you're looking at the scripture that says a good tree bears good fruit and a bad tree bears bad fruit, that says something. That says something like, instead of it overlooking this, we need to pay attention to these recurring patterns that are telling us there's actually a big problem going on with the whole. There's something fundamentally wrong, that this is what keeps producing all the time, is that what you just expressed, the standing ovation to basically not acknowledging, not spelling out, not being specific about what happened, making themselves into the victims when they're supposed to be confessing that they did something wrong. And people are all eating it up. And I mean, I can understand that must have been really validating. I get what you mean. Like the sense of that is, it's not, even if they look like they have their lives together, to dismiss that and not see what's right in front of them kind of gave you a sense of, maybe, am I right on this? A sense of perspective of what was happening.
Oh, yeah. Totally. I mean, you come out of a place which has offered you 100% truth, the only, kind of resources you'll ever need for life. You leave them. You've got to have some kind of I don't know. Remember, they always used to talk about you got to have absolutes in life. Well, man, I mean, sure, we can start there, right? Apparently not. Apparently not.
Child abuse should be given.
Right?
Well, it's not it
should be wrong to everyone.
Well, you would think, but the amount of I mean, the amount that's all coming out now of enabling and looking the other way and moving people around. It's just a conversation I didn't know we were going to need to have, but people do
here
feel.
We are. Yeah. What gets me is, I see so many people that I love, people that I'm close to, that I care about, and I see them doing what you said about,
clapping for the pastors.
Yeah.
There's good going on here.
There's good, constantly searching. And Gail, what you said about, your friend who was, the other podcaster you were listening to, who said they were constantly searching for the good, but all they found was problems. All they found was evil. All they found was rot. And I have to, talking specifically about Hillsong, they love to talk about the numbers and they love to talk about how much God has done, but there's so much pain, there's so much suffering, there are so many lives that have been destroyed. Is that worth it for this nebulous idea?
It gives God glory, Nate. That's what this is all. God's doing some good thing that you don't even realize. It's just around the corner.
Yeah.
The best is yet to come.
Right.
Did I hit all the taglines yet? In the Hillsong?
Yeah.
It's only about the moment, I guess, isn't it? Sorry, continue.
Yeah. I think what drives me nuts is the foundations of this church were rotten. It was started by a guy who ran away from the consequences of the crimes that he committed against children. And we like to say, there are a few bad apples. Okay, well, there was Carl Lentz, there was Reed Bogart, there was Darnell, there was, it's just what we say these just a few bad apples, or it was the celebrity culture in New York City, or, it was just this one guy at Hillsong College who, assaulted that girl. But we're seeing it repeat itself. At some point, the pattern has to mean something, like you were saying, Gail. But then at another point, we're not, again, to reiterate your point, Gail, we're not investigating the roots of this place. We're not talking about the fact that it was founded by a guy who covered up this incredibly dark.
Well, yeah. I mean, we got some big questions. I don't know how many hours you want to go for, but are you trying to tell me that in a small region, and it might be different, I don't know. Certainly some people who I've spoken to, I believe them, but you're trying to tell me that a weird preacher down the road and his wife and his 5 kids, and there's nobody in that town that knows? and that all 5 of those children don't have friends or girlfriends or friends that know, and that it never got back to them and they didn't know them, please. Early on, there was a website where a commenter said everyone knew to stay away from creepy Frank in Lower Hutt. So don't give me this Twin Towers in your soul stuff. The levels of complicity and culpability are way deeper than I think anybody wants to get their head around. Frank was a prolific and horrific offender. The Salvation Army had to move him around New Zealand, and eventually they threw him out, I think. Long story. There's a beautiful book, by the way, called Being Frank by Hazel Houston. Have you heard about it?
No, I haven't heard about it.
All right. So I'd just like to recommend a podcast I started called Reading Hillsong. So what we're trying to do, and I'd really love some help, and we'll talk about it later, is reading our holy text out loud. And so I've started with Being Frank by Hazel Houston, because Frank was psychotic and hallucinating and angry and depressed and unwell. And so we're going to read the books out, and so I would need more readers, because we're going to do You Need More Money, and I'll have What She's Having and stuff, because the books are insane. So that gives the history of it. But it's and then the levels of concealment are pretty bad as well. It's deliberate, it's premeditated, it's mishmashed statements, it's stories mixed together. It's been completely, the whole thing was completely premeditated. And the concealment was, completely premeditated. There's just no question about it.
It was cover up after cover up after cover up, I'm sure. Because you don't get to the places, you don't reach the heights that Brian Houston reached with that kind of crime in your history without very calculated efforts to cover up those crimes. Especially the fact that, the church reached how many 100,000 people globally, and we all act like this is, new.
But you do know, I can tell you that I went racing out with this, this book's going to come out and everybody's going to know Hillsong was started by a pedophile. And so I went to media interviews and they all wanted to know, so where does the money go? And that's the question I got asked. So, it then came out, a few years later, we had a Royal Commission here looking into child abuse. So now they are known online in Australia as, a church started by a pedophile with a guy who covered it up. But people just wanted to know about the money until, last year when Brian was charged by the police officially. Mm-hmm. That's when I noticed people coming back and reading about Frank. Now they're interested again. So it's kind of a worldwide problem, but it's right. It's nobody's really wanting to rock the boat too much, I guess. And to be fair, I suppose there is certainly something about digging and trying to find out where the money goes, because look at what has been going on. Hillsong, was it Hillsong Dallas or Hillsong Houston? One of the Hillsong Texas campuses shut down, and the reason they gave was embezzlement of funds by the lead pastors. Later on, we find out that the lead pastor, while he was working for Carl in Hillsong, New York, had raped a junior staffer. But that's a whole other story for another time. But again, there's that is an organization that is raking in money. I like to think of it as McDonald's, right? McDonald's is not a burger joint. They're not out to make the best burger. It's a real estate holding company. They make money by buying properties and franchising that IP,
you
right?
know what you're going to get no matter where you are across the world. When you go into a McDonald's, you know exactly what that's going to taste like and what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. And is that what comparison you're trying to make?
And Hillsong is a similar
replicating itself.
Yeah, replicating itself. But the money and why why McDonald's is able to sell 99-cent burgers. They're not making money by selling the burgers. They're making money through the real estate holdings. And that's something that's a question I have about what Hillsong was doing. And of course there's a lot of speculation, because I don't think any of it is clean. The fact that they didn't register as a church when they came to the US, they didn't register as a 501c3. a nonprofit. They registered as an LLC, a limited liability company, and they registered a number of limited liability companies. And the attorney who helped write the paperwork that then formed Hillsong, I guess, was it Hillsong Holdings LLC US or Hillsong USA LLC or something like that, was Carl Lentz's dad. So naturally, of course, that's how we ended up with the shit show that was, or the money sink that was Carl Lentz. No. But again, another story for another time. That's
well, you would have ended up with it in any kind of way. The system is so inherently abusive. It's just a different, it's incredible. So I will see you your franchise in McDonald's and raise you like, all I can see is an international money laundering operation that is using, like they throw a couple of church services just to get by the tax law. Right. They seem to be dependent on, they're dependent on exploitation. For some reason, they're dependent on sexual abuse. It just keeps coming up time and time again. And I've never understood since that. The one thing about that Frank thing is like my friend who was sitting next to me while we were reading this website was like, but a bad tree can't produce good fruit. And I was like, And she went straight back to like volunteering again, and we didn't really talk about it. So
the way people have been just able to overlook what's going on and just continue forward as if it's great.
It's got nothing to do with church. This thing has got nothing to do with church. You don't have to scratch much of the surface to see like anymore. I mean, what did happen, you guys might find interesting, is as much as they were part of that really back of nowhere warehouse thing, that whole area was growing and Sydney was growing. And, as you move further out of the city, more suburbs and stuff, and they really hit gold with the working class family or the lower middle class kind of up and comers. And very early on, the boys who were landscapers and in real estate were some of the earlier golden boys of Brian's. So some of the guys on the board today are still part of that. Developers, builders, it was a great intersection of, I call it Lebensraum, like Hitler, remember, he wanted more land, right? Brian's Lebensraum, land for his people. And it was good timing. It was really good timing. There was a lot of money to be made in property in this country, and it's just.
What was the response you got back then when you put out the book, when people weren't paying attention to this, where it wasn't not like the topic because of what happened in the US, when you started podcasting was the breaking news. But it wasn't in 2007, a lot of people were just, Hillsong was on a high. They were continuing to expand and to do well. What kind of reaction did Hillsong try to ignore you? Did people come after you? Did you get threatened?
No.
Did people just hope everyone would just ignore what you're saying and putting out?
I was so nervous because I was like, okay, all these theologians are going to come for me. And like, what am I going to do? And so they were like, it came down to like 4 questions. Like, do you still believe you're going to throw the baby out with bathwater? Where's the money go? Do you think they really believe? I don't know. Like I said, the Australian media have always been very cynical and suspicious of these guys. Anyway, suspicious of Australians are resistant to over-Americanization.
They should be.
Of anything. And yet, like, who's the first online when, like, Kylie Jenner put something out. But So it was a good reception in terms of Hillsong. My understanding was that all they said was, hey, we can't help if someone writes a book. Then, I don't know, you guys might know more than me because I've since been contacted by so many people that said, no, like we were told, as soon as kind of I arrived, I got told, don't speak to her, don't go and look up her stuff, whatever you do, right? Don't think of pink elephants. And so, Brian did a lot of marketing for me, basically, by going around and telling people, to the point where people have like got this it was kind of a tame book. It's not that outrageous. It's not that exposing. And, people haven't been able to read it for 10 years because they're terrified of it.
Wow.
Nothing really happened.
So Australian media was willing to pick up on it. They were interested because they're skeptical. Yeah. They had those small questions, or those 4 questions, or things that interested them. Obviously, North America was not coming to you because there's maybe not Hillsong.
No. My publisher had said to me, we can't sell this book in the States. If you had written a pro Hillsong book, we would be able to release it tomorrow. But, no, because every 6 months I was like, but they're growing. My publisher would be like, okay, let's go through this again. Right?
And I remember very vividly. I was working for another church at the time. But Hillsong New York was beginning to pick up, like the conversation around it was happening. I wasn't privy to what had been announced at conference in the year or two prior when they said that they were going to be launching Hillsong New York. But I do remember when things started picking up steam, when the greater New York City area started to hear about, well, Hillsong is coming here. And I was working for another church at the time, and I was very in tune with the Hillsong music machine, partially because the church I was working for didn't look too kindly on Hillsong. They thought Hillsong was too, all they talk about is God's love, and they love this, love that, and they wanted to talk about God's sovereignty and wrath and judgment, and so they weren't too fond of Hillsong. But I enjoyed it. I think it scratched an itch that I had at the time, and so I was kind of keeping track. I would attend Hillsong United concerts when they would come to New York City, and so when there was the announcement that Hillsong New York would be coming, and then we found out that Joel was going to be the lead pastor at Hillsong New York, I was pretty excited about this thing that was coming here, despite the fact that I was working for another church that was a pretty jealous church. They weren't, obviously they wouldn't say it, but they didn't like, bigger churches showing up in their territory.
They also imitated Hillsong, like their Jesus. The Jesus sign.
Yeah. A few years later, they were like, I saw them imitating.
I've been so interested. Sorry, but I'm so interested in like why these people did well in your country when you had so much bigger and better and broader. And Joel Houston, and it was like 8 the last time I saw him. Like, what? Someone's excited that he's going to lead something. Like, yeah, I know, but still, it's just these suburban kids, and you guys, what? Huh?
Yeah, it's so obviously, we didn't see their upbringing. We didn't see Joel Houston as like this, this snot-nosed teenage kid. Yeah, leading a youth band. We saw this, post-grunge electronica, U2 Coldplay vibe thing happening, and we were excited about that. It's, it was. And also, I think
Hillsong's good at marketing.
Yeah, Hillsong is very good at. They're very good at marketing.
They do, right? So
yeah, that is what they do. They also were selling back to America the thing that they bought from America, and they did it in a way that they basically they took the American invention, polished it, gave it some slick new branding and marketing and a sort of quote unquote Euro pop sound, and then sold it back to North America, and it was familiar to us, but different enough to feel like something new, but familiar in that, this is something that we love, right? We have the Andy Stanley, North Point, we have Elevation, Bethel, all of those things, we're all here. Chris Tomlin was writing his stuff, and we knew the songs, right? They had exported their songs for a long time, so we were familiar with the music, and I think that's how it blew up. That's probably, very, very, very simplified.
Australians can be really good at it. They can be really, really good at that technique. Look at like Portia de Rossi, right? Like there's these celebrities like Australians that become these huge successes, or marry a huge success. Like it's, one of them became like it's going to be the Queen of Denmark. She's like a girl from Tasmania. It's like insane. So yeah, okay. I mean, I always wondered, and the music had been going for quite some time before they really showed up. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's so powerful, so powerful music.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've come up with a music formula that has worked as a worship backdrop in evangelicals. They created a certain, and some people we've interviewed someone. I think our last episode or maybe a few episodes before was talking about how in his church he's like, he was asked to perform Hillsong songs in his new church, and he's like, we were just a glorified karaoke band popping out Hillsong. He didn't like that. He was a writer. He was a musician. He wanted to write his own music, and he didn't like the big concert feel to the whole. Like he could sense something was off. But at the same time, this is what the churches were craving. They wanted a soundtrack. They wanted a similar, familiar, comfortable vibe. And Hillsong managed to pop out something that resonated with so many across the spectrum, whether you were Pentecostal, whether you weren't. All the churches seemed to know this was like the worship music that we sing, and they made it simple. Hillsong would write their words so they were easy to memorize, so that they were catchy enough. And I mean, I had a friend who was in music production, and he was an artist, and he was like, Gail, this stuff is top notch. The singers, the artistry, the production value is so high that as a musician, I'm just astounded by the quality. And they now over time, I've learned how much they've exploited people, and they would seek after people with gifts who could do stuff really well and use that to market their stuff. But they did a good job in getting that out there and just like, I'm from Canada, Nate's from the US, you're sitting there in Australia, and it went out, and we were singing Hillsong worship for a long time before they ever came to North America. Just darling, shout to the Lord, all of that,
I'm guessing that's why they don't really have to worry about anything, because that will live on forever. They don't really have to worry who's going to, between that and the metaverse, they're sorted.
Yeah.
They struck up that deal with Zuck, right?
Oh, that's right.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't actually read into it. I saw the headline.
No, you need to read into it. I'll just send you the link.
Yeah.
Stick it in the show notes so people who are curious about this can definitely read up.
Whether you use it or not, but this is what I think. Why would they care? What happens to Brian in court, or who really turns up to these places, because they've got this deal with. They made this deal with Facebook right before they changed their name to have online church, virtual reality church. Virtual reality church, with all kinds of in-game purchases.
Yep.
So, sorry.
Surprise, surprise, they're monetizing it.
With Sam Collier they apparently met with, excuse me. So,
it was Sam Collier. Which, again, and then now, of course, he's doing his own thing because the Hillsong brand is not marketable any longer. So he has to run away from it and immediately start his own thing right across the street from where it wasn't even like he was, saying, I'm going to, redo this congregation and we're going to rebrand. Like, it was Hillsong in Arizona. Okay. Hillsong Phoenix, that the entire church, they all up and left Hillsong. But if I'm not mistaken, Sam Collier, he decided to open up a new church right across the street from, practically right across the street from where Hillsong Atlanta had been. And because,
Well, at least he's honest. Do you know what I mean? Like it's people are happy to keep going. Let's keep going. Let's not think about it. Let's have a brand new, fresh thing. And it's a perfect marketing to the perfect audience. I saw an online account I saw them discussing their accounts and how there's all this money in these bank accounts, but the church is shutting down now, so we're just going to have to use it as we need it. Huh? Yeah. End of story. Yeah, it was fascinating. So, why not? Why not just start up next week? Forget it. Who cares?
Stealing.
Well, yeah. I mean, we call it obtaining money. This is what I don't understand. So if I knock on your door and I ask for a donation to the Salvation Army and I then go and use it for something else, we call that obtaining money by deception. If they do it and they've raised money for one thing and they've spent it on something else, why isn't there a class action lawsuit to get everybody's money back? I don't understand why the lawyers are not swimming
I feel like the U.S., you can correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, because you tend to know more about this, but my hunch is that in the U.S., religious people have so much power, especially evangelicals, and they don't like to go after churches. Like, I know Australia is doing a lot of steps to hold people accountable, religious organizations accountable, the commissions that they've put forward and the new, laws, steps that they're taking towards this. I feel like in the U.S., the churches are so in bed with the politicians in terms of propping them up, in terms of helping them get elected. And so the government has a hard time holding churches to accountability because they're one and the same. They're so like, I'm happy for Australia that they're linked to the president, the prime minister's linked. Prime minister, you guys have prime ministers like Canada. Yeah, okay. Your prime minister's link to Brian Houston has been severed. You have a new guy in there, and I'm so happy for you guys in that. Mm-hmm. Like, the U.S. has. I mean, evangelical culture has propped up Trump, and I feel like investigating evangelical churures is difficult because they're smart about how they go about the laws, but the laws also don't clamp down nearly enough.
And filing a class action lawsuit, like who would go after them? Because like I hate to say it, but evangelicals are some of the most gullible people who are susceptible to fraud, frankly. They don't, they think that everything that was done to them is okay. It's done in the name of Jesus. So, okay, I feel a little uncomfortable about this, but you know what? I can support what Sam is doing across the street because, it's all being done in the name of Jesus. So like,
that's why they're primed for conspiracies, theories, and anti-vaxxer propaganda. Like, all of that is a lot.
Because you can cover a multitude of sins by just claiming I'm doing this, for the good of spreading the gospel. And I feel like that's it's fraud, but
there's a group that happens to be very groomed for it. Like you said, Tanya, I think you brought this up earlier, not trusting your own self, really like trusting your authorities and your church leaders and believing they're there for your good and not questioning it.
There's a huge amount of money that, groups and businesses have given, and there's a paper trail that says, I've donated this for this, and it went to what? Like, it went straight to Louis Vuitton? Where did it go? So, do they just can you tithe to Louis Vuitton in this place? I mean, I can't wait.
There are some comedians, late night talk show hosts that have made joke churches and registered them to show how badly the system is set up, to protect religious organizations, no matter how not serious they are, no matter how fraudulent, no matter how much of a satire, like it's a satire church, and it's still being able to register and being able to
and yet Christianity has a church, right? The Kardashians have a church.
For
purposes, at least they're honest as well. So, I mean,
Kanye West started his Sunday services, that whole thing that was basically, he saw what Hillsong was doing and was like, there's a lot of money in that. There's a lot of money in that. So he's got to do it. I mean, who was it? John Termini, who was one of Carl Lentz's boys.
Interim John.
Yeah, Interim John,
Interim
right?
John, because do you know if you rearrange the letters of Termini, it is actually Interim.
You're right. Oh my God, that's hysterical.
I have too much free time. I'm sorry.
He was successful in I don't remember if it was real estate or finance, but he was successful outside of religious organizations. But once he got a taste of money, of the money that you could make inside of the religious world,
unregulated money,
exactly,
money.
tax free. He stuck with it, and he hightailed it out to Hawaii and started a new church.
What is it you wanted me to reconcile myself to? I was born here almost 60 years ago. I'm not going to live another 60 years. You always told me it takes time. It has taken my father's time, my mother's time, my uncle's time, my brother's and my sister's time, my nieces and my nephew's time. How much time do you want for your progress?
I hate you, naturally. And I hate black people. Things are going to get worse before they get better.
What is presented to me as an American does not look like me.
Because
You're not allowed to be a black man in corporate America.
You give us a hard time for being white, and being American, and being in control.
And when you live under a situation like that constantly, and then you ask me, whether I approve of violence. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff happening right now. And you know what? We need a space where we can debrief some of it and deconstruct. If you've been looking for a POC-centered podcast that engages with intersectionality, religion, critical race theory, and some hip-hop culture, then you need to check out Profane Faith. I'll be your host, Daniel Whitehodge, and we go in every other week. So check us out wherever you find your podcasts, or check us out at whitehodgepodcasts.com to see what other platforms we're on. Cool? All right. Peace.
Hey everyone, I'm Nate from the Full Mutuality Podcast. I wanted to take a moment to say thank you for tuning into this show. We're so grateful that you've decided to spend your time with us. Seriously, Dan, Gail, Jessica, Kathleen, Scott, and the rest of us here at the Dauntless Media Collective couldn't produce content like the show you're listening to without your support. I'd also like to invite you even further into the conversation. Right now, there are some great discussions happening over in the Dauntless Media Collective Discord server. If you're interested in chatting with other folks who are deconstructing and decolonizing the oppressive traditions that they came from, please feel free to hop on into the server. If you don't know what Discord is, it's a place where communities can gather online for chatting on a wide variety of topics. In our Discord server, we have channels devoted to general deconstruction conversations, some meme sharing, therapeutic venting about whatever religious bullshit you're currently dealing with, and even a channel specifically devoted to talking about the latest episodes of the podcast you're listening to right now. I hope you'll join us. You can log in directly to the Dauntless server by clicking the link in the show notes, or heading to dauntless.fm and clicking the link in the top banner. See you there.
We couldn't write this stuff like the way, say, like Brian and Bobby are behaving online at the moment on social media.
God, I know.
If I made that up, you'd be like, that's really cliche. Like, go back and come up with something like more real. But
I mean, I think the Hawaii church was called the
Right.
the Hawaii.
No. The House Established.
The House Established
is the name of the church.
The acronym was the.
And the acronym is THE. And the T.
that is good. That's
Right?
good. Wow.
Right? Sell it.
Wow.
Stamp it. The T in the stands for the.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I'm thinking up like you could go that way and like horizontal and vertical as well and stuff. It's crazy. These guys, Cross Equals Heart has got to be the cleverest thing on earth. They specifically are marketing to people, it's so complicated, but people we have a very multicultural society here, and we've got a lot of immigrants, we've got a lot of people with a lot of kids and not a lot of time, and a message where English is not your first language. You're not looking for nuanced meanings, and they're able to target the incredible amount of people with like you were saying with the lyrics. It's really simple, so not hard to translate into another 50 languages and market. I like that.
What you were saying about this is like comedic almost. I mean, I really think there's been documentaries, and there will be more documentaries on Hillsong. Hillsong has so much garbage behind it that there's more coming out. But also, somebody needs to, instead of just making documentaries, make a docu-series of the drama, to actually play out, just
funny, the drama.
I don't know if you've seen, Nate and I watched a docu-series called Under the Banner of Heaven, and it was about Mormonism. And it was fascinating, but it was an acting out of actual real story that happened in Mormonism.
Yeah.
Who was it? Sam Worthington and
Sam Worthington and Andrew Garfield.
Andrew Garfield, the guy from Spider-Man.
See that Sam Worthington? There's another one, right? One day he's laying bricks, the next minute he's like, "I've got $8 billion from Avatar."
But just to say that series was really eye-opening about Mormonism, but it was like watching it like a reenactment. I feel like someone needs to do a reenactment of the stuff that's come out of Hillsong.
I write a lot. Well, I don't write a lot, but I have been known to write fanfic for Pat Mesiti, because it's just Pat wakes up, looks in the mirror, thinks how great he is for the day, out he goes. You know what I mean? It's just, behind the scenes. Can you imagine? We could write anyway.
There's so much. There's so much material there.
There already is. It's called The Righteous Gemstones.
That is. Have you ever seen that series?
That wasn't. But see, that got stupid. Like it got a little annoying, and then it's like, well, maybe it's not. Maybe like that is how crazy.
It's funny because it got stupid, but then real life church got stupider.
Yeah.
So you're like I felt like I was sitting there watching this, going like,
this is so far fetched.
It can't be. It's so far fetched. This couldn't
happen in real life.
Happen. And then we look at the headlines and we're like, oh my God, it's happening. And it's even worse than what they did in the show.
Like I don't know if you remember this, but Joel Osteen, some guy found in their bathroom tons of money. And we're like, wait, the Righteous Gemstones wrote this script before this ever happened in the most ridiculous fashion. And it happened in a real life megachurch.
Man, so can you imagine get the predictions? Because we used to also be like, man, we used to look at tweets like Brian going, we're not toxic. It's a false narrative. And go, he's obviously he's got to be up drinking in the middle of the night and gets all angry and tweets, right? But we were joking.
Right.
But now you look at that and it's like, that's not something you tweet at 10 a.m.
No,
right?
It's like what Trump used to do, and you're like, somebody try and take away his phone at some point and be like, you got to stop tweeting. Like, you just we need to rein you in. This is out of control.
Imagine being that wealthy and being able to have that many advisors and obviously not listening to them.
And still getting away with pulling off this nonsense. Oh man.
Okay. Or something. Yes.
I know. I wanted to circle back to, you had mentioned, how you got the response and the ways people responded to your book. And then now I want to fast forward. Here we are. Things are like, for a long time, it looked like Hillsong was running along smoothly. You're talking to your friend about London, about the US, like all this stuff that's happening and why are they expanding? And, the whole wait and see, and now we're seeing what's the consequences. How has the response changed to you? Like, are you getting a lot more North American people coming to you? Like, oh, we weren't listening or paying attention before, but now we want to know what's the scoop?
I get the most I've gotten recently is Bible college students are like, hey, so I used to really believe you were batshit crazy for a lot of years and you're not. And I'm like, thanks. It's nice. I guess what's been interesting is at that same time, obviously technology advancing and lots of other churches being that way, whether it's Vineyard, whether it's Bethel, whether, so more and more people are connected and kind of saying the same thing. I don't know. I'm kind of, don't forget, I'm old. So Carl Winston.
You know what?
This is old news. I'm really old news.
This is a good in segue into your podcast because you talk about being old, but the introduction into your podcast has this 80s vibe going, and it's great, and I love it, and it makes me smile when I hear it, and it's your own thing that you're doing. But we mentioned your book, but you started a podcast, and it was related to, in your mind, when all this was breaking in the U.S. with the Carlin stuff. Is that what motivated? Could you tell us a bit about how that took off?
And like I said, Brian had done all this marketing for me, but he'd also done the Hillsong marketing. So I figured in kind of Pentecostal kind of borrowing fashion that he would have encouraged, I'll just use his, all his marketing and hard work, and make a podcast called Leaving Hillsong because we had those conversations back then. I always still deep down sort of probably figured it was me. I'm a weirdo. I'm the one that couldn't fit in. I'm the one, it's not I'm not graduating medical school like that guy or whatever. And, back in the day. And I'd made this book and I'd done this book and I kept, nothing happened. Nothing happened for years. I had a Google alert set up with nothing. You get a song or something and then everything happened, at the end of 2020 with you guys. And it really hit me, I guess just over a year ago, that self-doubt. I was like, wow, you should have done more. You should have done more. And there's going to be more people. There's going to be more people. If this is what is happening in New York City, the smartest, quickest, most fingers on the pulse people in the world, there's going to be more and more and more of it. And, let's start just finding out what people's experiences were. So the few people that I'd been in regular contact with over the years, a few of them agreed to tell their story. And I thought, we'll just do a really simple, like, how did you get there? What made you leave? And what's life been like since? So that if there were people that were like, I wound up there with my wife and kids, we had a great time, I changed jobs, and life's been fantastic ever since, that will fit as well. But I never got contacted by those people. And yeah, I don't know who walks out of here. I don't know who walks out of there unscathed. There's obviously a spectrum of impact, but man. So yeah, it was really kind of like it started out as like my own weird apology to New York City. Like, I don't know, it was weird.
We're sorry we brought Hillsong to you guys.
And I'm like really sorry about Nicole Kidman as well. I'm so glad you guys kept her there. No, I just like I was like, got to do something then. Got to do something. See what happens if you say something. Like, people might just not care. Or you can go. And the joy of podcasting is you just go to the store and get a microphone, and then like that's it. And you press play, and then people are like, wow, it's a podcast.
You know, I have listened to many of your episodes, and you take the time sometimes when Hillsong has breaking news, an article, when Hillsong puts out a letter to try and explain their nonsense, you will, read through it line by line and dissect it. You have been on Hillsong's tail for a while. You know what's going on. You're in touch with what's happening on the ground in Australia. And your podcast has done a good job to get into that backstory, to talk and interview people who were at the original Hillsong. And so I think it's really insightful stuff. I think it's helpful for people maybe coming out of New York to understand the trajectory of what just happened where they are and where did this come from and how did it get to where they are now.
And then, I mean, the experience might be different, but it was always going to be the same. And all that's changed is their predatory nature got more sophisticated and funded better. And, you see this thing over and over of people being like, oh, I can't believe I bought into that, or I regret that so much. And it's like, how are you going to stand up against this multi-million-dollar marketing organization that, like, recruitment is their number one, next to fundraising, hallmarks of a cult, recruitment and fundraising. But yeah, how are you going to stand up against that? They're really good at what they do.
They are good at what they do. I'll give them that.
And I wanted to. Sorry, you go ahead, Ray.
No, I was just going to say.
It's our relationship. You go. No, you go.
They are really good at what they do, but their leaders are all cowards. Because I think, at some level, some of them, not all of them, and probably not most of them, but some of them know that they're wrong and know that what they're doing is evil. And others of them are just too blinded by the money and the celebrity. And a lot of them are also scared because they have no other marketable skills, that they just continue to dig their heels deeper and deeper.
And it's not because I'm like a history buff or anything. And my friends are a little bit older, but this is why I find the whole thing so much more disgusting now, is because it's premeditated. I no longer think. I was told early on that there's no decent Assemblies of God pastor. I was like, no, there's some nice people. No, right? They all know. They're all keeping the dirty little secret, the dirty big secrets. And
no, I'm not saying that they aren't all of them complicit and all of them knowledgeable. Yeah.
But even more so, like, now we have the data, and that's why I felt more confident about the podcast, because we can't say, oh, well, that was, they're only young. We've got 40 years of data now of what these people do, and it's the same thing. So every time they do it knowingly. Every time they try and do gay conversion therapy, they are risking a murder. Essentially, I think it's like an attempted murder because they know what it does to people.
Yes.
And they don't care. So they know people go bankrupt. They know that, like, it's the most hideous thing can you imagine these miracle babies things with the IVF and Bobby, and you gave money and then you got pregnant, and they know what they're doing. It's disgusting. But we have the data now. We have, do you know what I mean? We have the history. We don't have the evidence, but we can tell stories. And that's why this is really exciting. It's all we have.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I appreciate so much that you're putting that data out there, that you're breaking it down for people. We don't all know all those stories, like the ones you just gave with the baby and there's lots of things that you've seen firsthand, heard firsthand. You comb through it, and on your podcast you put out. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for.
Thank you guys. It's just, I want people to blame themselves less, because this isn't a coincidence. It's not an accident. These aren't like good people who were disorganized. No. You know, and by the time you take a stage to start telling people what to do or taking their money in the name of God, you know, you'd want to be really clear about what you're doing, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Because, you know.
Oh, totally.
There's a lot of unhappy people, and it's not going to, like, they're not going to stay quiet forever. They're just not.
No.
Yeah. And you're providing a platform for people to talk, to speak. And you're also providing the emotional labor of yourself telling your own story. And I need to highlight that. I need to highlight the work that you're doing on your podcast, because it's a labor. There's a lot of work that goes into that. You said, I just pick up my phone and I record. No, you pick guests, you think through, you know, you research what's happening at Hillsong, and you talk from your experience. But that experience is very invaluable. And the stuff that you're putting out there, you know, you thought of the New York people, you had them on your heart with what they were going through.
I cried so bad. I was like, wow, they did it. They did do it. It's like, you know, you can, you can see something terrible is going to happen, and no, it's all right. So like and then that really became about kind of believing in my own truth, even though I was kind of like questioning myself just before we started recording. I was like, but you know, really kind of going, okay, no, keep going. Don't listen to other people when they're telling you that you're crazy or you're the Antichrist or whatever. Like, you know. You cannot escape your own truth, whether you're like thinking of leaving Hillsong, you're 20 years down the track, whatever, you know.
I would never even guess, listening to your podcast, that you had to struggle through questioning, am I making this up?
Man.
Like,
oh man.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like the worst is like, is there a God? Well, who am I going to believe now? Because what? Well, I don't believe it. Well, then how am I? What? So, you know.
All the questions you're left with at the end of a deconstruction.
Right.
No one gives us a map for living this out on the other side.
Yeah.
We all have to figure it out on our own.
It's so great to connect with you guys. Like, just, you know, not having to explain your weirdness as like.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying your podcast. Have you gotten other New York feedback from people that are tuning in from North America? Like, is it Australia, all Aussies you're getting feedback from, or are you getting to hear from?
Well, the US was coming in at number 1 for a while, which was great, but they're like, I'm still only in like the couple of thousand listens or downloads an episode or something. And I'm like, how come Americans, like, you know what I mean? Like, more Americans die from like being attacked by cows and listen to my podcast. You know what I mean?
But it's, you know what? It's still something, right? I think, you know, if it's even just, you know, 25, 30, 50 people, you know,
this is the thing. And, you know, it's a valuable listen. And, you know, I know it means a lot. Sorry, I keep cutting you off, but so that was terrible, didn't it? But like, yeah, it's crazy because my stats are like a roller coaster, like up. People want this. They want to know that they're not the only one. And then it's like, boom, and then back up on Showtime. And and you know, people are like, you're listening.
Yeah. And I think we're definitely at, I don't know if we're at fever pitch yet, because I know there's still so much more to come. I don't know if you're familiar with the Acts 29 network. But it was sort of a big deal here in the U.S. for a while. Mark Driscoll, Mars Hill Church. Yeah. So I came out of before I got to Hillsong. I was working for an Acts 29 network church. We were a Mark Driscoll, Matt Chandler. We were that kind of a church. And then, years before the implosion at Hillsong North America, Mars Hill imploded, and then. Now we're now sitting here, and within, like, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I think it was actually just this past week. I don't know, my timeline is all messed up in my brain, but Matt Chandler had to step down from the Village Church.
Mark Driscoll was the guy before him.
Yeah.
And like Christianity Today we started our first podcast addressing, and we still talk about it. We still interviewed someone recently about bringing down that mega church, but like it is one of the most religious listened to podcasts worldwide, was about the rise and fall of Mars Hill. And it's because it was like Hillsong in the sense, it's funny because Zach was the guy who brought down Mars Hill was like, I don't get the Hillsong stuff though. But like we were trying to say there are some similarities in what happens when someone at the top is messed up. They culturally have a huge influence. They're able to market and replicate across not just the US, but they can branch into Canada, they can branch into Australia, they get all over the place in evangelicalism. And then watching the collapse, I'm sure there are lots of people in Mars Hill who never saw the whole place crumbling and shutting down. Hillsong is not completely shut down, but where it was versus where it is now, I think, like you said, there's still a lot more in front to come. How are you feeling about all of that?
Well, this trial in December, like I know, like Brian's cruising around the world at the moment going like, hi, can I come preach at your church, please? Hi, hello. Hey, hi, sorry, can I, what? Dentist, you got to go now. You're going to the dentist now, right? But wait till he goes on trial, and every other single one of them in the whole world has to watch real time. This is real now. This way, like, because our Royal Commission was an investigation into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. So it's like, an inquest. What came out of that inquiry was then sent off to the police to investigate where appropriate, lay charges were. But, there wasn't going to be, I don't even think there's any great consequence for perjury, even though, people give evidence under oath. And those boys were so uncomfortable. If you watch their testimony, it's all on the Hillsong Accountability YouTube. They were all so uncomfortable, except for George, in the witness box, because they were like, fish out of water, not used to being told what to do, not used to their charming kind of cab ride conversation not going down so well. Brian, like, one of my favorite moments is when Brian's like, I had PTSD. And the lawyer's like, so going back to the letter of May 9th, right? I'm Brian, and I just told you, like, I'm not happy.
And you didn't clap and tell me that you're praying for me at this moment and just all rally to my side in sympathy about how I'm the victim of this whole story? It didn't happen that way?
It's a criminal trial. The entire place is it's narcissistic Olympic Games, right? So there's all these old men. They were all there from the beginning. They all want their piece of the pie. They're all looking at retirement, and they're like, cool, who can I throw under the bus to get ahead, right? Because I don't have any empathy either, boys. And Brian knows this, and he's like irrelevant. He's like Taylor Swift with no bookings, right? He's like, what am I doing? So by December, he's going to explode with lack of narcissistic supply. Like, you can only get so much supply out of Bobby, right? Then all the others will be like, man, we've all been like concealing all of our fellow offenders. It'll be a shakeup. It'll be really interesting. I really hope the message gets through. Whatever happens, he's unlikely to go to prison, and if he does, he's unlikely to stay there for long, I would think, in this country. The humiliation would be the punishment. His fine name, his apostleship. But I really hope the message gets out that this is a crime. It's not a sin. It's not an error of judgment. It wasn't a mistake. These are crimes. There's no praying about it.
Can you elaborate on that point? Because I think it's such an important one. And anyone listening to this probably needs to sit on this for a second. It's not a sin. It's a crime. Can you explain why you're saying that and why people need to take it to heart?
Yeah, I'm so distressed to see this message of forgiveness like confetti being preached. You're just supposed to throw it around and, be continually on the front foot of forgiveness. And it's, again, not accidental. They want you to have this open heart to be ready for the next time they make a mistake or do something wrong or spend the money somewhere else or whatever it is, because, you'll just forgive. And it's such a dangerous predatory ideology that, it leaves people so open to abuse. And yet, were these things to take place anywhere else, they would be crimes. Organizations would be shut down.
Oh, yeah.
These places would not be getting tax-free status. They'd be getting, shut down and investigated, and people would be sent to prison. Now, I've heard all of the reasons why. You don't take a brother to court, or you don't want to attack the body of Christ, or whatever it is. Touch not the Lord's anointed. I just keep coming back to the same thing. It's like, well, truth will come out. Which side of history do you want to be on? Mm-hmm. It's no longer a case of if anymore, because these boys are still living like it's 1987, and they can get away with just moving from town to town.
Nope.
And I think the other fascinating thing has been watching, like, say, with Me Too and movements like that. The more people that come forward, the more people come forward.
Right.
And if you don't feel like what happened, if you don't feel like what happened to you was a crime, think about it if it happened to your best friend. Because we're totally taught to devalue ourselves. Yeah. Greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his brother, but maybe not himself so much.
I love the point that you made there. Sorry to
you made so many good points.
Oh, you made so many good points.
I'm jumping in because she just was spitting.
God, just fire. Just keep spitting fire.
Repent. I went through it with a friend of mine, taking the morning after pill every Monday morning, and having to pray for forgiveness on, Saturday nights, church on Sunday, morning after pill on Monday. No, right? No more. It's no. And you guys who are covering it up, oh my God, sorry, not that I think you're listeners. The people who are covering it up, I keep thinking about how frightened we all are to do things, how these adults have so many excuses for why they look the other way, or why they didn't do it till Tuesday, or how they didn't want to upset anyone or offend their friend or be upset. Can you imagine how much courage it takes a little kid to tell someone?
Right.
And you cover it up. These guys cover it up.
Right. Yeah. So you made a point earlier, and it's a callback to one of the first conversations. Yeah. It's a callback to one of the first conversation that we had on our podcast about Hillsong, and my friend Lizeth, and what prompted her to speak up after she was sexually harassed by a Hillsong, New Jersey pastor. And the reason she said what she said was because what if it wasn't me? What if it was? And she started thinking about the other girls that she had worked with, that she had volunteered with. What if it was one of them that experienced this, that got these text messages, that got these,
didn't even have the savvy that she had. I mean, she didn't put it that way, but she kind of had a little worldly experience to realize what was going on and what game was being played. But she thought of how Christians were groomed. Mm-hmm. And if someone else had dealt with this kind of sexual abuse, they would have been quiet and been told, I must have done something to cause this, and just sort of brushed it away. And I think of your story and how much you doubted yourself, and now you're just fire. You're just spitting it out. You're just letting people know that this, and in watching how other people speaking emboldens others to speak. It's happened towards you as you've created your podcast, but you're also emboldening other people to be able to tell their stories as well. Yeah. And that's a huge thing.
It's the only thing I can see that brings other people forward. Unless it's something that's happened to them personally or one of their, family members, a crisis or something, people don't really speak out unless they see other people doing that. And you guys are doing the same work as well. It's fantastic. So, I mean, we were all taught that, it's our original sin, and we got to, getting back to the beginning, you know what I mean? We got hell dangling over us the whole time. And so we repent, repent. And now I'm report, not repent. That's my hashtag. Report, not repent.
I love it. Yeah. I love it.
It's easier said than done. I understand that. But even if that idea can get into people's heads, because I literally, me, I have a social work degree, and I'm still imagine if you had to take someone to court for something they did a long time ago, I would feel bad because, I'm supposed to have forgiven them, and that means I'm bitter and I've got the roots of bitterness in my soul. And
you just described what grooming looks like within evangelicalism, to prepare people to never report, to never express what's wrong, the whole fear of being bitter, the fear of not forgiving. These are, I think the word, I'm trying to think, spiritual abuse fits, maybe even spiritual bypassing, this idea of using spiritual concepts as a way to avoid reality, as a way to avoid accountability. And so
it's clever.
It works. Yeah. It really does work. It does cause people to shut down.
People are colluding. People feel like they're then colluding, and then Hillsong has had this incredible ability to make people like part colluder and part victim, or sometimes part perp, part victim, or it's obviously very complicated stuff, but it's very clever and it's deliberate.
Yeah. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, our good friend and fellow podcaster, Janice Legata, who was, like deep in the Hillsong world. And that's something that she mentions a lot on her podcast, that she said on our podcast, that Hillsong has this magical ability. And you said it right there, this like incredible ability to make you both the victim and the perpetrator, to be complicit in the abuse that you're also experiencing.
They almost teach you how to do it. I think I was reading, I follow a few Instagram accounts and I wish I could remember which one so I could give them credit. But one of them was talking about the steps Hillsong takes to keep you from questioning stuff in the media and to view outsiders as critics that you shouldn't take seriously. Kind of like what they did with you, trying to shut you down. You didn't even realize until later how many people have been warned against you. But like just the idea that, the outsiders don't have the Spirit of God in them the way you do. So they don't get it. They don't understand how God is moving and working. And so they've like created a whole system to cause people to not listen to any outside critics, anyone except their pastors, their leaders, the people who are already involved in this whole thing. It's very hard for them to listen. So
even like people they speak to, and there's journalists looking to talk to people. And so, a lot of people are terrified that the media are going to destroy them. And this is like years after leaving. They still there's this deep distrust of the media, external media. It's really interesting how that continues. Yeah.
They've done a good job at running their brainwashing camps and indoctrinating people into, like, once they've left, to even be scared to, speaking out even when they've left, it feels challenging, which says a lot about how successful they've been at putting that message out there and instilling that fear. This has been a really deep, meaningful conversation. I'm so appreciative. I think I had a last question, unless you have one. I don't want to be the last word, but I wanted to ask you from your book, what is the overall message that if you had to sum up your book and what you were trying to convey for anyone who might want to order? I know like the publisher finally made it available in the US.
Well, it should have been on Amazon the whole time. And then they did this thing called print to order and everything changed and I got old. And now I'm like, what? 3D, what? So what do you mean print to order? They got like a Xerox over there in America and what? With the fax machine? Sorry. So, the message from the book is it's okay to question. I mean, it's that very simple kind of, it's okay to question. I'm not going to tell you question what, question everything, question your mother. I don't know. But, it's okay to question if we can start there. Because it just seems like truth will come out. Truth will just come out one way or another. It's going to happen. So, you don't have to beat yourself up for having questions,
That vibe comes out in your podcast too, not just your book. Yeah. I definitely feel like your guests can come from any direction. If they're still evangelical, you leave space for them. If they're still religious, you leave space for them. If they're past all of that, like I love the ones I've listened to, I really appreciate that. You just leave the floor open for
how to think. Don't tell me how to think. Don't tell me how to feel. So I cannot go around telling you how to think and feel.
So we're going to put a link to your book in our show notes for people who want to check that out and be encouraged, who've come out of not being told they shouldn't think and question and that it's sinful doubting, to check out your book.
And if you're not somebody who goes into show notes and podcasts and you're just listening or you're driving and you don't want to like open up your phone while you're driving, please don't. The book is called People in Glass Houses and the podcast is called Leaving Hillsong.
You guys are the best.
And it's been fantastic to listen to many of my long distance drives, visiting Nate and listening to your updates. And thank you for keeping us all informed. Thank you for keeping up to date on stuff and for bothering to get that out to the people so that those who want a breakdown can listen. They can hear your 80s music at the start of your intro, which I love.
And that is all Jeff Bullock stuff. That's from the 80s. And Jeff has been supportive of me since 2005, and he was like, you can use my music, and I'm like, cool, let's trigger from the beginning then, huh?
That's amazing. That is so cool.
Love it. Thank you so much, Tanya.
That wraps up another episode of the Full Mutuality Podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. And if you don't already have one, head over to our website, fullmutuality.com, for a list of all the apps you can find us on.
We couldn't do this without you, our listeners, so thank you so much for your continued support. Speaking of support, one of the best things you can do for us is to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review.
I'm pretty sure 5-star reviews get you an extra crown in heaven.
But seriously, if you found this episode insightful, spread the word and share it with your friends.
And don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Full Mutuality. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Full Mutuality Podcast.